Hello, everyone. This is Fadi, and we welcome you to a continuation, of course, of this fascinating series that we have entitled Holes in the Narrative. Today, we're going to talk about yet another issue that oftentimes is brought up, especially by our Muslim friends, and the fact that there is numerical increase among those who are joining the flock of Islam. Well, we are going to talk about the numerical decline when it comes to that, and we have no better than our brother Mel to join us here virtually and address this issue. So the question is this: why Islam is set to go into numerical decline? And with that in mind, Mel, what say you, brother?
Well, it's great to be back. I would say the first thing, it's kind of obvious to everyone, is the only reason why Islam is growing numerically is because of the high birth rate. And people might think, well, there's nothing that you can do about that, and it's going to remain like that for centuries to come. But actually, I've got news for you. That is not the way it looks going into the future. So that's the first thing. So expansion of Islam through birth rate, it's not something that Islam can depend on for much longer. And secondly, there is a huge issue with apostasy, particularly in the young population. So that is another issue that's decreasing the size of the pie, as it were. Mm-hmm. And also, Islam is really struggling to attract converts to Islam. It's got an awful lot of work to do because of a lot of bad stories about Islam over the past 20 years. For some reason, terrorism and violence and threats and so on doesn't seem to encourage many people to want to join Islam. And that's not to paint everyone with the same brush, but it has a bad image. And the Dawists who are trying to attract people to Islam are really struggling. And different surveys suggest that there are more people leaving Islam than joining Islam. So that's the main gist of what I'm looking at today.
Yeah, so please walk us through this argument.
Okay, so some preliminary remarks. Christianity doesn't care about its numbers or its relative size, but in the salvation of souls, we really don't care.
Amen.
We started with just 12, and everyone that joins beyond that is a blessing. But we don't go around boasting about our numbers. And at the end of the day, it's the truth that matters. And the last time I was in a church, the exits weren't locked. If anyone wanted to leave, there was no problem. So
that's right.
It's a different.
Now, go ahead, brother. I will interject.
It's a different way of looking at things, I was going to say.
Absolutely, and the biblical history is fascinating. I mean, the remnant theology itself is a message in the Bible, but started with Adam and Eve, right? And then the seed was promised at the garden after the fall, and then you get to the flood, and then God preserved the seed through Noah as one family, and then we get to Abraham, and the seed is preserved through one family, and out of that came multitudes, technically speaking, and then at some point in the history of Israel, they went into exile into Babylon, spent 70 years, and it was estimated that there were at least 500,000, maybe 1 million, yet only 55,000 returned. And the seed was still preserved. And then Jesus came, and Jesus used the 12, like you said, to spread Christianity for the last 2,000 years. And God knows how many hundreds of millions came to Christ today. And yet, we don't go around writing books about numbers. We have a book of Numbers, by the way, but has nothing to do with that. All I have to say is God basically assured his people that it doesn't really matter what their numbers are. He is fighting their battles. And it doesn't matter, really. It's not about numbers. In fact, when David wanted to rely on numbers and did a census to count how many people he has and his power, God punished him for that and caused basically a pandemic to kill many, technically speaking, to show him that, you know what, if numbers are that important to you, then I'm going to show you that you cannot do anything. Just look at the story of Gideon. Started with thousands, ended up with 300. No wonder the story of Gideon is such a popular one, because only 300 God used to scare off an army in the thousands, technically speaking. Yeah, go ahead, brother.
Okay. So Jesus gave people the freedom to walk away, and this has been the practice too of Christianity. Christians don't barricade the doors to stop non-believers from escaping. You're always free to leave. And I don't care what background you come from, whether you are antagonistic to Christianity or indifferent to Christianity. I think everyone would agree that Christianity is a religion where you're free to leave. We don't hold people to the religion if they don't want to be there. And so, for example, Jesus said to his disciples, "You do not want to leave too, do you?" So he doesn't block their paths. He basically, in a very gentle manner, he inquires, do you want to stay with me or do you want to leave? He doesn't go running after them to say, "Come on back," or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there is a demographic time bomb which is about to turn the fastest growing religion into the fastest shrinking religion. I think I may have done a typo there, but not to worry. And this is on top of the growing specter of apostasy in Muslim majority countries. Let me just go back there for a second and just talk about that a bit further. 1 second. Okay, so there's two things going on here. We have the fact that there's demographics that are reducing the overall numbers of people living in the Middle East and North Africa, but also there are lots of people leaving Islam as well, making the problem even worse.
That's right.
And as we go into the decades ahead, we're going to be looking at a much smaller Islam overall. So what's the fertility rate? What do we mean by this? Because this is going to be a relevant way of understanding this discussion. The fertility rate is the average number of children per woman in a population. So 2.1 is considered the replacement level. Anything below that figure leads to population decline. Anything above that would lead to population increase. I'm not here to judge family size. I'm merely reporting on what happens when people choose to have large or small families in a population. So I'm not making a judgment on that one way or the other. So if we take an example, the US fertility rate fell from 3.7 to 1.7 from 1960 to 2019, or a fall in 2 births per woman on average. So you can see that's quite a big jump downwards. And the effect of that is that the population growth of America or the US has stalled, and simply because there are people moving to America, the population has been sustained, but essentially it's on a downward path because of that. Okay. Yeah. If we look at what has happened in the Middle East and North Africa, it has experienced one of the fastest collapses of the fertility rate in the world. So if you look at where it was during the same period as America, it was close to 7 children per woman, or about 6.8, and it fell to 2.7 in that same period. So what does that mean, essentially? It has fallen 4.2 children per woman in that period. That's a massive collapse. Right. To compare it to the US fell by 2 during the same period. So even though the Middle East and North Africa started from a higher point, you can see that there's a much quicker collapse in the birth rate. So Muslims might want to brag about how they have more children in their families than in the West. Well, I wouldn't be bragging for too much longer, because the trend is not looking good going forward.
Especially in the Middle East, which is the main hub for Islam. Things are demographically changing in the Middle East. Philosophies are changing. Marriage practices are changing. Divorce is at rise. Not everybody likes to have a lot of children anymore. Women are working, and so on and so forth.
Yep. Now, if you look at the trend, you can see that eventually, going forward, there's going to be a point where the fertility rate will dip below the replacement rate. And then going forward, it's going to simply get worse and worse.
That's right.
And what And what's that going to mean? It's going to mean that the overall population in the Middle East and North Africa will eventually reach a peak, same as it happened in Europe, the same as it happened in the US. And then, like those other places, it will also go through the same decline of population. This is inevitable. It's just demographics, essentially.
That's
and
correct.
What's interesting about this is that this is happening in different parts of the world, regardless of the religion. So this is not a reflection on the religion. In each case, the religions haven't been able to turn this around. This is a sociological issue. This is to do with, as you mentioned, people's sense of marriage and what they want in their life, and whether they are more interested in money and materialism or interested in family and so on. So this is really just the issue that's facing the world at the minute. So the Middle East and North Africa's average fertility rate will likely go below the replacement rate before the end of the decade. So we're in 2021. So within about 10 years, we're talking about dipping below that replacement rate. So we're not talking a million years from now. It's actually just around the corner.
Right.
Now, there's a time lag with this. It will be decades before this leads to a collapse in the population of these countries. To give you one example, last year, China had more deaths than births for the first time in decades. And the population is set to fall for the coming decades. And this is due to the one-child policy from decades ago.
Right.
Now, we also have another factor that we need to consider, which is the fact that life expectancy is lower in the Middle East and North Africa than it is in the US. So as you can see over on the right there, it's just 74 years and a little bit. That's the life expectancy there. It's a little bit higher in America. So it means that these problems will be created much quicker as a result. Now, if we take the example of Japan, since 1973 onwards, Japan has had a fertility rate continuously below 2.1. Its population isn't propped up by immigration, so it is a good model of what is likely to happen in the Middle East and North Africa. Now, it's actually worse for the Middle East and North Africa because not only does it not have many people moving into those areas, but it has had a net migration out of those areas. So that's going to make things even worse for those populations.
That's right.
So if we look at Japan, it took 35 years for Japan's population to peak once it dipped below 2.1, as you can see from this diagram. So on that basis, we could say that by 2065, the population in the Middle East and North Africa will have reached its peak, and from then onwards will start to dip. But it's actually likely to reach its peak much earlier than that because of the fact that I'm not taking into account all of the outward immigration that's happening.
Oh, yeah, and the wars and all of that kind of stuff that is causing that.
Absolutely. And things are accelerating as well. Sociologically, people's view on marriage and that, and even their views on religion is changing. So this will only speed up. So it's very hard to predict exactly when you're going to see it, but we're not talking a million years away. So the claim that Islam is the fastest growing religion will soon be replaced by the reality that it is the fastest shrinking religion.
Yeah.
And again, I just point out, yes, this has happened in the West. This has happened to Christianity. This is not really a judgment on the Muslims themselves. We've all seen it happening in Europe and America, but this is the reality of the demographics. You will have to get used to this. So I would suggest to the Taoists, they need to change their narrative. They cannot continue to say that they have the fastest growing religion. This is going to be changing very rapidly. And the Middle East and North Africa are trying to hold back the inevitable tsunami of apostasy by the most draconian anti-blasphemy and anti-apostasy laws in the world. And you can see where those laws exist on the map. And in my view, nothing says confidence in the tenets of one's religion like a plethora of apostasy laws. It says it all, really, that you have to block the exit to keep the numbers up. I don't know if you want to say anything on that.
No, I mean it's just fascinating, figures, and I hope our audience or and the viewers watching this right now can take notes of this and they begin to use it to counter this argument. I mean, you see, this is the thing about the Dawas and propagandists, if you wish, claims. They just shoot off their mouth and they come up with these bogus numbers, or at least they take one report and they run with it, and no one is pushing back against it. Now they're being faced with the challenge, and these are documented data that you are reporting here.
Yeah. They like to claim that Islam has got 1.8 billion followers. But what are they doing? They're basically taking the populations of all of these areas and assuming 100% adherence to Islam. So, the reality is that Islam doesn't have anything near 1.8 billion. So it's anyone's guess how many people actually really, truly believe in Islam currently. But whatever that figure is, it's not going to be going upwards, pretty soon. I think that's the reality of it.
Right.
Now, if we look at this Pew research that was done, it found that I found this very interesting. It found that loving Muhammad was more important to US Muslims than following the supposed revelation of Allah. So if you look at
Of course.
See there, 72% considered it to be really important, whereas it was, I can't barely see it, I think it says 59%.
Yes, 59.
Following the Quran and Sunnah is being important. So there's a clear mismatch. And a common figure that's given for the US is there's an apostasy rate of 23%, which is probably going to rise in the coming decades as well. So if a Muslim family have 4 children, 1 in 4 is going to leave Islam by their 20s or 30s. So these are shocking figures, really, for any religion.
Right.
Now, I looked at this source here. It looked at the Middle East. Are people losing their religion? And it indicated strongly across the Middle East and Iran, almost half the population is loosening their ties to Islam. Like, this is shocking stuff. Governments have reacted differently to calls for reforms of institutional religion as a result. Now, this will not be news to most people, I'd imagine. There is a crisis at foot in the Middle East and North Africa. People are questioning Islam, they're questioning the standard Islamic narrative, and they're having doubts. In a survey, 58% of Iranians said that they do not believe in the hijab altogether, while around 72% oppose the compulsory hijab.
Mm-hmm.
Officially, Arab states have major Muslim populations varying from around 60% in Lebanon to almost 100% in Jordan or Saudi Arabia. However, several recently conducted and very comprehensive surveys in the Middle East and Iran show an increase in secularization and growing calls for reforms in religious political institutions. Now, what's interesting with Lebanon, only 25% describe themselves as religious. This is a conclusion after 25,000 interviews in Lebanon. Personal piety has declined some 43% over the past decade, and this pattern is set to continue. And in Lebanon, the civil registry includes the sectarian identity of every Lebanese citizen. Among the 18 options, non-religious is not listed. I wonder why that would be.
Because a lot of people will check it, probably.
Yeah. So they're trying their best to hide the reality that people are losing their religion, as REM sang about, but they want to hide it. They don't want to include it in the registry. And a lot of people are being put down as Muslims in the registry who are no longer believing Muslims. Now, if we look at this interesting survey, if you look at the top there, 47% have gone from being religious to non-religious in Iran. plus 6% have changed their religious affiliation. It doesn't go into details about what religious affiliation, but most likely it would include Christianity. And the collapse is even worse if you look at the bottom one in the bracket of 20 to 29-year-olds.
Right.
It's
The young
52%.
generation. Exactly.
So things are not looking good. And this pattern, again, is set to only get worse. So what happens when the older generation move on and this younger generation grow up? This is just going to be reinforced. And, young people are not getting spiritually fed by Islam like they did in the past, so they're turning away in droves. And this is despite the fact that this is obviously still very dangerous to admit to.
Right.
Now, based on 40,000 interviewees, it says here in the survey, the Iranian society has undergone huge transformations, such as the literacy rate has gone up spectacularly. The country has experienced massive urbanization. Economic changes have affected traditional family structures. The internet penetration rate grew to be comparable with the European Union, and fertility rates have dropped. So all of these things together have had a huge impact on Islam there. Compared with Iran's 99.5% Shiite census figure, it found that only 32% identify themselves as Shiite Muslims. So you can see there's a mismatch. When people are actually interviewed, they were basically admitting in private that they're no longer believing in Islam, and yet officially they're still saying that they're Muslims, obviously for fear of repercussions. I don't know if you want to say anything on that.
This is definitely amazing surveys, and it shows that a fraction of those who are on paper identified as affiliated with certain branch of Islam in this case, actually a fraction of them is saying, well, yeah, maybe we identify ourselves. And you wonder if they're saying it just out of fear. I mean, sometimes you wonder if they really mean it.
Exactly. So even that 32%, there's probably is a portion of them that are, afraid even with this survey to admit it. So it could be a lot less than that for all we know.
That's right.
So it's not looking good really in the decades ahead. So fastest growing religion, in reality, I think there's a different picture there, Right. And so my conclusion really is that, 2065 or sooner, you're going to be seeing something like this happening. The population from which Islam draws its numbers will soon peak and go into decline. So if you look at it this way, the pie is getting smaller and the proportion of people who are Muslim is also getting smaller. So you're going to be looking at not the fastest growing religion in the world, but the fastest collapsing religion going forward.
Right.
So
that's wonderful, brother. Thank you so much.
It.
Thank you for doing this, and hopefully everybody's been enjoying this series. Lord willing, we're going to do just a wrap-up episode just to kind of like address in summary everything that we have covered in here. So to help people, at least you can share the introduction or the wrap-up episode with others to give them a flavor of what this entire series is about. But you're going to find it very helpful. And each one of them, I would say, it stands on its own, even if you want to watch just one or use one of those arguments against the standard Islamic narrative. Thank you, brother, as always. We appreciate you. Thank you, everyone, for watching. This is Al-Fadi. Over and out. God bless. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, CIRA International, and click on the bell so that you receive notifications whenever we publish a new video or go live. I would also like to appeal to you to consider becoming a Patreon patron by clicking the link right below. By doing so, you can give towards the production of these videos. There are also other options for you where you can give to our channel. I thank you from the bottom of my heart.